Okay, guys, welcome to day 2. We'll be playing 2 rounds of Swiss today, followed by a cut to the top 32. As a reminder, the rounds today are a continuation of the tournament from yesterday. The big part of that means is if you received a penalty yesterday and you get the same penalty today, the correct answer when the judge asks you that is yes. Otherwise, I get to have a conversation with you that isn't all that fun. Okay? So, congratulations on making it to day 2. You guys have 40 minutes. You may begin.
To the 150th Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series tournament here in Columbus, Ohio. We're up to round 10 now. There are 2 rounds of Swiss today, followed by a cut to the top 32 for the playoffs. And coming in at 7-2, needing this win very badly to stay alive in the tournament, are Timothy Lee and Robert Cedar.
Lee and Cedar are both using Shadow decks, but both of them are using very different strategies. Timothy Lee is using an artifact deck. He integrated an artifact strategy into his Shadow deck. He's using 2 copies of Artifact Beagle Talk, 2 copies of Artifact Lancia, 1 copy of Artifact Moral Talk, 3 copies of Artifact Ignition, and 3 copies of Artifact Sanctum in his deck. Robert Cedar, on the other hand, is using a different type of Shadow deck that we have not yet seen on the live stream. He is using the Star Seraph Shadow deck that we mentioned earlier in the tournament. While the Shadows fuel the central strategy of each deck, they will play very differently because of the fact that they've integrated separate strategies into their decks.
Star Seraphs are based on Xyz summoning. Rank 4 monsters. You have Star Seraph Scepter, which lets you add another Star Seraph to your hand when it's normal or special summoned, and Star Seraph Sovereignty, which can be special summoned from your hand when you normally special summon another Star Seraph, and if you do, you draw a card. They can't be used for small Xyz summons of 2 materials. The entire point is to get monsters with 3 or more Xyz materials on them. So to that end, they're using Stellar Knight Deltaros and Evil Swarm Ouroboros. It's a bit smaller lineup than you would normally expect. A lot of people like to use Stellar Knight Ptolemaeus as well. Some will even use number 10 Illuminite, because that'll work alongside their Shadow effects to dig through the deck for the all-important Shadow and El Shaddai fusion. So we haven't seen it yet, but this is actually a debate that's raged on in the community. Like, what are the best light monsters to play along with your Shadows to make Construct?
Yes, El Shaddai Construct is very powerful. It's pretty clear to most Shadow duelists that's one of the stronger fusion monsters that you can summon. But since the Shadow monsters are all dark monsters, there is that question of which light monsters will you use to summon it. To summon Construct, you need 1 Shadow monster plus 1 light monster. You can see in Cedar's hand that he opened up with Crush Card Virus. Both of these duelists are actually using Crush Card Virus in their decks. It's not particularly powerful here. Against a Shadow player, the Shadow duelist that's hit by Crush Card Virus can send 3 of his Shadow monsters with 1,500 more attack from his deck to his graveyard, and their effects will activate. So using Crush Card Virus against your opponent might actually help him more than it hurts him by taking the monsters out of his hand.
Mathematician is normal summoned, and in response to its effect to send a level 4 monster from the deck to the graveyard, effect failure is chained, negating it.
Summoning Mathematician is one of the strongest first-turn plays for Shadow decks. It's one of the most typical first-turn plays. By summoning Mathematician, you don't have to commit too much to your field, which you would maybe leaving vulnerable, but at the same time, you'd be able to start activating the effects of a Shadow monster that you send to the graveyard, and leave a monster on the field that if they destroy in battle, would allow you to draw a card.
Shadow Fusion comes down for Lee. So the trick in a Shadow Mirror match of any kind is making sure that you don't leave a monster from your extra deck on the field so that your opponent can't use a full-powered Shadow Fusion. So we'll see Winda coming down here. That's Hedgehog and Beast being used to summon her. But by the end of this turn, Winda's not going to be there anymore.
Yeah, there's a good chance of that. So now he's going to use the effects of his Beast and his Hedgehog, since they were sent to the graveyard from his hand. Beast's effect lets him draw a card. Hedgehog's effect lets him add a Shadow from his deck to his hand. Looks like he's taking another Shadow Beast with the effect of his Hedgehog, and now he's going to draw a card.
In terms of chain order, in this case, you want to make sure that you search the card first. So put Hedgehog as Chain Link 2 and the Beast as Chain Link 1 so that you don't draw the card that you were going to search out. And that's exactly what he does, and he picks up a Mathematician. Excellent find. He just can't play it this turn because he needs to tribute set that Beast over his window. Another question is he going to attack right now? Attacking will get his opponent one card closer to his own fusions. It's a very precarious situation because any loss here is it for the tournament.
Yes, they both have 7-2 records. Once they pick up a third loss, they won't be able to make it to the top 32.
Winda attacks after all. Mathematician is destroyed, and its effect to draw a card triggers, which happens to draw Cedar, another Mathematician. Now we see the tribute set of Beast, and because Winda went to the graveyard, Lee is able to pick his Shadow Fusion up from the graveyard. All of the El Shaddolls have an ability when they're sent to the graveyard. You can pick up a Shadow spell or trap card from a graveyard and put it back in your hand.
A more reckless player might have left the window on the field, but that would have been a big misstep. As you know, the more experienced Shadow duelists know, leaving a monster from your extra deck on your field can leave you very vulnerable to Shadow Fusion.
And he knows he's playing against Shadows at this point. Once you see the Mathematician, you know.
Right.
And especially since he used Effect Veiler on it, he knew what was coming. Cedar ponders his 6 cards. He's still got an Effect Veiler in there. He's drawn a Shadow Fusion of his own and activates it. Sending Shadow Hedgehog and Shadow Beast to the graveyard. Searches out another Beast with his Hedgehog. And then draws 1 card for the Beast. So the important thing here, in the case of Shadow Beast flip effect lets you draw 2 cards and then discard 1 card. You definitely attack here, because if you don't attack, your opponent's drawing 2 cards, discarding 1 card, and they still have a monster on the field to use as a fusion material. In this case, Shadow Falco is the card discarded, so he's still going to have a monster on the field, but it's not going to have quite as many attack points or have as good of an implication for synchro summoning.
Right, now we see Cedar do exactly what Lee did on his previous turn. He tributed his fusion monster in order to get it off the field and set Shadow Beast.
And it looks like he set his crush card as well, even if he's not actually going to play it.
Yes, I can't imagine he will.
We see Lee now has both Shadow Fusion and El Shaddol Fusion. One of the goals early on when you're playing Shadows is to assemble both of those cards in your hand. Under best case scenarios, you'll be able to fuse twice during your own turn, and then once more during your opponent's turn, if you use one of your monsters as fusion material to get back the El Shaddol Fusion. In this case, though, you still need to be careful not to leave any extra deck monsters out in the first place. Falco's flip summoned, Its effect activates to target a shadow monster in the graveyard and try to summon it face down. He goes for the beast again, and it resolves successfully. Checks his graveyard once more. There's one Winda in there. He only plays 2 of the 3 allowed. Three Construct, 2 Winda, 1 Shekinaga, and 1 Noyatilis. Almost the same thing on Cedar's side, except he plays a second copy of Shekinaga.
So he's activating Shadow Fusion.
Pondering using his effect veiler here as a fusion material for Construct. Trying to think, what can I possibly use this on?
Does he have a way to get rid of his own monster that he special summons from the extra deck?
That's what he's thinking about here. He's got Squamata, so that could double as any of the other shadow monsters in his deck through its own effect to send another shadow to the graveyard. And he does have another Hedgehog to go search for something out. He only has 2 copies of Beast in his deck, though. One of them is face down right now, and I believe the other one's in the graveyard from that first fusion. Does use the effect veiler. Elshadal Construct hits the field. And he has Squamata and Construct on the chain.
Cedar uses his own effect veiler to negate the Construct's effect, but that won't stop the Squamata.
Choices for Squamata. He could send a Falco, but he's already flipped one face up, so he won't be able to summon it back. Hedgehog will get him another monster from the deck. He actually runs a very lean lineup of shadows. There's only 9 total. 2 Beasts, 2 Falco, 2 Squamata, 2 Hedgehog, and 1 Dragon, which he could send to try to snipe that face-down card right now.
Right. Seems like he might do that.
And he does. And he's probably disappointed that it's a card that was never going to be played against him in the first place. Then again, could just be happy that he didn't hit a Sinister Shadow games.
Yeah, that's true.
See, he's drawn an artifact. That's Artifact Begaltak. If you're unfamiliar with them, they can be set to your spell and trap card zones as spells. If they're destroyed during your opponent's turn, they special summon themselves back, and they have effects when they are summoned during your opponent's turn.
That was an amazing draw for Robert Cedar there. With his Shadow Beast, he drew Raigeki and Shadow Fusion. It doesn't look like Lee can get rid of the Construct from his own field without also leaving another... he contributed for the artifact.
Contributes for the artifact.
Begaltak. I stand corrected. So the Shadow Fusion is not as powerful as it was a moment ago when that monster was still on the field. But the Raigeki isn't a bad draw against a field of 3 monsters.
Yeah, Raigeki's very good right now.
Yeah. And even the Shadow Fusion, even without his opponent having an extra deck monster on the field, isn't a bad draw. He needs a way to summon monsters to the field eventually, even if it's only during his last turn where he attacks with his fusion monsters to win. Eventually he's going to need some fusion cards.
Mathematician, the second. This time its effect resolved successfully. You've already seen 2 effect veilers out of Lee, one used as fusion material, one used to negate a Mathematician, and that is both of them that are in his deck. Squamata is sent to the graveyard, and then with Squamata's effect, Falco is sent. It's a pretty standard play. It leaves you with 2 monsters that will replace themselves while only playing 1 card out of your hand.
So he sets the Falco to the field. Why do you think he sent the Squamata to the grave there?
In general, you send Squamata because you want to have something to bring back. Sometimes it's force of habit. Sometimes it's just I don't need to draw any more shadows, so I need to get as many of them out of the deck as I can.
Okay, so he activates the Raigeki, sends all 3 cards to the graveyard. The Beast's effect and the Shadow Falco's effects will activate. The Falco special summons itself to the field face down, and the Beast lets him draw a card.
That is not the best situation to be in there. When you get hit by Raigeki and you basically summon your Falco back, because otherwise you'll lose it in general.
Right.
Not an enviable position to be in.
Right, the Mathematician just destroyed it.
Now we see that he's got his own Mathematician along with Falco, Shadow Fusion, and Mistake. Mistake, not super useful in a mirror match like this, but it would be useful against Star Seraph Scepter,
That is true.
which he doesn't know that he plays yet.
That we haven't seen the Star Seraphs, even though he is running 3 copies of Star Seraph Scepter as well as 3 copies of Star Seraph Sovereignty. So, among the 6 Star Seraphs, he's yet to see 1. So, I assume he'll set that Mistake anyway.
And then be pleasantly surprised if a Scepter shows up later on.
Right.
So the great thing about Falco is that it has no level limit on what it can summon back from your graveyard. So he's got a Construct and a Winda there, and if one of those is summoned back by Falco, it's not summoned from the extra deck anymore. So he can enjoy the benefits of his fusion monsters without enabling his opponent's Shadow Fusion.
Oh, that's very cool.
Shadow Falco flips up on Cedar side of the field. Effect's going to resolve successfully. He's thinking about choosing the Shadow Beast. Also taking a look at Winda, but winds up taking the Beast. Does not have a level 5 Synchro Monster in his extra deck. The only ones are Black Rose Dragon at 7 and Leo, Keeper of the Sacred Tree, at 10. Mathematician attacks, hits another Falco, and the tables have turned. Lee goes straight for that Construct, and then thinks, maybe I shouldn't make such a snap decision, and goes for the Beast instead. Another face down card for Cedar.
Do you like taking the Beast there over the Construct?
You know, I don't. I get that he wants to draw more, but at this point, I kind of want to start trying to win the game. My opponent has a Falco in attack position that I can get through.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The Beast, taking Shadow Beast can certainly be justified here. It's hard to resist drawing cards, but Shadow Construct has a lot of attack points that his opponent would need to deal with, and the opportunity to summon it to the field without being vulnerable to Shadow Fusion appears to me to be too good to pass up. But Timothy Michael Lee disagrees. He passed up that opportunity and did summon the Beast.
He's got hit by an effect failure, so he didn't get to draw any cards after all.
Is he chaining that El Shadow Fusion?
A little unclear. He seemed to indicate that he was attacking the face-down monster.
Now, if he chains the Shadow Fusion, El Shadow Fusion, he will get the effect of the
so get
Skarner, right?
the effect.
Okay.
So he's just sort of pointing in the vague
Okay.
direction
So,
of the monster.
So it
not
appears
declaring an
he
attack.
did, in fact, chain the El Shadow Fusion to get it off the field and use the effect. And he wisely discards
Yeah,
Crush Card
that's what he
Virus, a
discarded.
card that he's probably never going to want to activate in this matchup. We can probably expect that Timothy Lee and Robert Cedar will both be siding out that Crush Card Virus going into the second duel.
Yeah, that thing's gone.
Yeah. So he follows up by summoning the Mathematician.
Activates its effect. It's successful.
The Mathematician has actually always been one of my favorite cards from the animated series.
Yeah, a lot of people were thrilled when that thing was in Dragons of Legend.
Yeah, it was used by Bastion Misawa in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I feel like it was not a well-known card compared to the rest of the cards in Dragons of Legend, including Eye of Timaeus.
Dark Magician, Gorilla Dragon,
Yeah,
Soul Shard, all of that.
There's a lot of more popular cards, but I'm a fan of the Mathematician.
Mathematician sends Shadow Hedgehog to the graveyard, but his opponent Cedar has Mistake, and it's pretty much the only effect that you can use it against in Lee's deck. Yep, it's the only searching effect there is.
Cedar's deck is interesting because he's using 3 copies of Mistake in his main deck, along with 3 copies of Star Seraph Scepter, which search his deck for cards. So those Scepters are essentially nullified by his own Mistake.
Yep.
It seems like that could definitely backfire on him, as it very well might. But I think the mindset a lot of duelists have when they include Mistake in their deck, even when they're searching for cards, is that it's so much stronger against certain other decks, particularly Necros decks, that they don't mind losing the effects of a couple of their cards to stop the effects of more of their opponent's cards.
Battle phase, Mathematician tries to take on the Beast. It has 1700 defense, though. Ooh, it does survive. Does not activate the effect of Beast.
Oh, I believe he activated the effect, but now he's trying to use Shekinaga to negate it?
During the damage step. Shekinaga negates the activation of cards, I believe, so that should be legal. And our judges are taking a quick look at it as well to make sure, and we'll check the text ourselves. It does negate the activation, so it can be used in the damage step.
Yes, so that's exactly what happened there. He sent El Shadow Fusion from his hand to his graveyard after negating the effect of the Beast. Now he's activating Artifact Ignition.
Artifact Ignition acts like a mystical space typhoon. However, the condition to activate it is that you need to have an artifact in your deck, because the other part of the effect is to set an artifact to your spell and trap zone. It also has yet another effect. If you destroy Artifact Ignition, you have to skip your next battle phase. Other, if the opponent destroys your Artifact Ignition, you have to skip the next battle phase.
Yeah, it makes it a really cool card. I always forget about that secondary effect on those artifact spell and trap cards. I know Artifact Sanctum also has an effect that activates when it's destroyed.
Destroys a card.
Yeah, so that's also a powerful effect. It doesn't happen too often because more often activated summons Moral Talk from the deck, and then Moral Talk gets used to destroy a card. But it happens enough to be relevant in many situations.
And that's Artifact Lancia. You can tribute that from your hand or field, hand or face up on the field, not from your spell and trap card zone, during your opponent's turn to stop cards from being banished for the whole turn.
We've seen Artifact Lancia a lot, actually, this weekend, but usually not in Artifact decks. People have been using them as a way to counteract cards that would otherwise banish from the duelist's field, hand, or graveyard, namely Trishula, or also to counterbalance cards like Necro's Mirror, which would allow a Necro's duelist to banish his own cards. So here we have Artifact Lancia at home in an Artifact deck. So that's kind of interesting.
But Shekinaga on the field, Shadow Fusion goes up to full power.
So yeah, so now he has the opportunity to fuse any 2 monsters from his deck together.
Goes with Veiler and Squamata. Now in this case, the Squamata is useful because it lets you gauge the reaction from your opponent before deciding what to send for it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so the construct will activate, will be on the higher chain link and resolve first. So its effect will send 1 card from the deck to the graveyard. After he does that, he can send a card with Squamata's effect from his deck to his graveyard.
Looks like he's got Squamata, Dragon, and Falco as the remaining Shadow cards.
Well, El Shadow Construct can send any Shadow card, not just a monster. And Shadow Squamata can only send Shadow monsters.
Oh, is it only monsters for both? Or can they both send any card?
I believe El Shadow Construct can send any Shadow.
Construct, send one Shadow card, yes. And Squamata. Yes, Construct has gone and sent Shadow Core to the graveyard so that he can bring back a spell or trap. Oh, Squamata's also any Shadow card. So he gets 2
you're right.
wild cards here.
Right, it is any Shadow card.
And the cards he sent were Falco and Core. Shadow Core, when it's sent to the graveyard, gets you back a Shadow spell or trap. So he retrieves the Shadow Fusion.
Yes, and it looks like he also sent his Falco to the graveyard, which he then used its effect to special summon.
Now, he does note that his opponent probably has plenty of light monsters left in the graveyard for his own construct if he destroys Shekinaga. And he checks through his opponent's graveyard to see how many Shadows are there. Because maybe, just maybe, he'll be able to get away with leaving his extra deck monster out if his opponent hasn't got any Shadows left. So he's counting. The general Shadow lineup is 10 or 11, but Lee only has 9.
You might also be looking for Shadow Fusions, right?
Yes.
Just there's no way, or is there any way to bring those back?
Yes, if Shekinaga is destroyed.
Right.
Or do you mean the Shadow Fusion monsters?
The Shadow Fusion spell card, although if he has a way to deal with the Shekinaga and the Shadow Fusion is already gone, he might consider himself relatively safe because his opponent would have to use the L Shadow Fusion to fusion summon a monster, and that fusion monster would have to be sent to the graveyard to bring the Shadow Fusion back.
Yeah, El Shadow Fusion requires legit materials.
Right.
You can't just use them from your deck.
Right. It's basically a quick play polymerization for Shadows. So, looks like he attacks Shekinaga.
Construct destroys the Shekinaga. Since it was special summoned, it's automatic. No damage is done.
And if Lee had Shadow cards in his hand, could he have negated that effect?
During the damage step, yes.
Okay. But lucky for Cedar, he did not.
He does now, though. It's a Shadow Fusion that he retrieved with the effect of Shekinaga.
Right.
Mathematicians crash into each other, offering a draw to both sides. And we see Cedar has picked up Mind Control, which could be used to make a game-ending push.
Yes. But Lee has picked up Ring of Destruction.
Yeah, speaking of game-ending.
Yes.
It doesn't do a whole lot of that anymore.
Yeah, it very rarely ends the game now. It still can if your opponent's monster has if any monster has exactly the number of life points that your opponent has. But if that monster is stronger than your opponent's life points, you can't use Ring of Destruction on it.
Looks like Lee has 1 Shadow left, and it is a Squamata.
Okay, so he's not going to get a lot of use out of that. Although I guess, as we discussed earlier, the Squamata could send a Core to the grave if he still has one of those.
He does have 1 copy of Shadow Core in his deck. Sends the Squamata and Lancia. For El Shadow Construct. The effects are activated. Probably going to send Core and an Excess Fusion spell. Extra copy of El Shadow Fusion to the graveyard as well. He's now out of Shadow cards in the deck, though Cedar does not necessarily know this. That means that any further Shadow Fusions are useless. In a battle of Construct versus Construct, both of them will destroy each other with their effects. And so with the ability of Shadow Core, he picks up Shadow Fusion. Just because he doesn't have any Shadows left in his deck doesn't mean his opponent knows that.
That's true. So his opponent might still be playing around that, try to play around that Shadow Fusion.
You have to watch out for the Falco here, though. He may... So the constructs crash into each other.
Now, will they destroy each other?
Let's take a quick look at the text of
They will.
construct. They should form a chain, I believe, much like Catastore does.
Yes, so both of them destroy each other, and at the same time, they both decide they're bringing back Shadow Core.
Core is necessary for Lee at this point because it's his only shadow monster left.
Right. Cedar probably feels the same way. He probably doesn't have many shadow monsters left either.
He has got the Falco, though, and that'll let him bring back one of his fusion monsters.
Yes. So as you mentioned before, that is a powerful play. It summons the monster without leaving it vulnerable, leaving yourself vulnerable to Shadow Fusion. Granted, the Shadow Fusion is less relevant now than it was before, since these decks are now thin to the point where there are very few shadow monsters to send to the graveyard with its effect.
Cedar doesn't necessarily know that, though, and he brings back El Shaddai Construct face down.
Right.
For normal summoning, Shadow Hedgehog face up. Don't see that every day.
You do not.
Now it looks like he's just trying to get in damage as much as he can.
Well, that was stopped by the Shadow Core.
Core has 1950 defense points as a monster, and it can be used as any attribute of monster for the fusion summon of a shadow.
I think that's how a lot of these Shadow decks summon in the new El Shaddai Noyatilis.
Yep.
They don't appear to be using any water monsters in their main deck, although a lot of them do use mind control, so they could take control of a water monster against a Necros deck that they would like to summon a Noyatilis against.
And as you can see, Cedar just picked up Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning, which will probably... I mean, if it goes through, Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning is the very definition of a game-ending card.
It is.
The ability to attack twice, or just put the game on lockdown by banishing every monster that comes out. Could be very difficult for Lee to fight back against this without his own copy of the Envoy.
Yeah. It seems particularly powerful in this matchup because it's a big boss monster that is not coming from the extra deck.
Right.
For Shadow Fusion to counteract.
Shadow Core switches to attack mode. Not the most offense-oriented monster in the world, but it does take down Shadow Falco. Back to Cedar. He's got his Hedgehog and his Construct. He can't actually get any damage through that core since it's a special summon monster, but he does still have Mind Control, which could be used to take it and perhaps use it for a fusion. And he has the Envoy as well. Construct attacks into core. Ring of Destruction is activated to destroy the Construct and inflict 2,800 damage to both sides. Now Lee is the one trying to get as much damage through as possible because he's got a big lead.
Yeah, that was a big hit.
Will we see the main phase 2 Envoy? Envoy banishing Shadow Core could be in the cards.
Bring Shadow Fusion back to his hand with the effect of his Construct.
You see he's finally drawn a Star Seraph. It's the Sovereign, which is not particularly useful on its own.
He might actually be able to finish this duel, regardless of the outcome, without even revealing to his opponent that he has Star Seraphs in his deck.
If he could do that, that would be preferable. And we do see main phase 2 Envoy in attack position.
Looks like he might be going for the finish here. Is he able to? Oh no, he's already
had his battle phase,
yeah.
So he can still banish Shadow Core, but that'll
Right.
get it out of the game permanently.
Right, he's already.
He just doesn't know what his opponent's status is in terms of how many Shadow monsters are left, and he does know that his opponent has had access to numerous copies of El Shadal Fusion throughout the match. So he's gauging whether or not he wants to activate the effect here. That's probably also why it's in attack position, just in case it's something like a Shekinaga, so he won't get run down. And both players quickly count to see what cards might be lurking left in the deck.
This is definitely important to keep track of, because what's going to happen next, or what could happen next, is wholly dependent on what cards are left to play. So it's an obvious thing, but if you're more meticulous in determining which cards are left, you'll have a lot more success trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Envoy has plenty of success in banishing that Shadow core, and we can see
Yes.
that Jar of Avarice is in Lee's hand, which could restock his deck.
Yes, there's one copy of Jar of Avarice in Lee's deck, and it actually seems to be really good right now. He's, as we mentioned before, he's pretty much out of Shadows. By sending 5 of them back, that's 5 more effects he can activate. It might even throw Cedar completely off. If he thinks that Lee doesn't have any Shadows left in his deck, he might leave a Fusion monster on the field, thinking he's a monster special summon from his extra deck, rather, thinking he's safe from Shadow Fusion.
Tell you who's not safe, it's Lee. He's facing down almost game right now in terms of Shadow Core and Envoy's attack.
Yes.
And Cedar has picked up El Shadal Fusion. So during the battle phase, he can play it to summon another Fusion monster and finish things off.
Yes, so Shadow Core has 1450 attack points. Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning has 3,000 attack points. Combined, they don't quite reach 5,000 life points, which is how many Timothy has left. But with El Shadow Fusion, might be able to get there. Depends on the back rows.
Jar of Avarice slipped face up, and we do know that there's an artifact down there.
There is an artifact down there.
So Cedar is probably thinking, oh, some of those are probably bluffs anyways. I know he has at least one Lancia down there. Who's to say he hasn't got the second Beagle attack, or if he's just run all artifacts and no sanctums. Falco, Beast, Squamata, Artifact Ignition, and El Shadal Construct are the cards chosen to go back to the deck. And Lee will get one last draw. Catches, none of the cards that he can draw can actually be played on his opponent's turn. And it looks like he picked up a second copy of Shadow Fusion there. Envoy attacks successfully.
So a reason to use Jar of Avarice right there.
Make your opponent think. Just make him think that you might have drawn into something.
Yeah.
Like a Battle Fader. Haven't seen that guy in a while.
I don't think he's gonna trick him in. Well, I don't know if you could trick him into the Battle Fader, into thinking he might have a Battle Fader.
He certainly hasn't stopped him from playing the El Shadal Fusion.
Yeah. Didn't seem likely that the Jar of Avarice would change his plays, change Cedar's plays, but I guess it's worth a shot.
Hedgehog and Core are both sent to the graveyard. Core brings back the El Shadal Fusion that was just used, and no search for Hedgehog. Book of Moon, though, is just enough to keep him in. He only has to deal 1,050 damage.
So now, that window that was special summoned from the extra deck, even though it's face down, it was still special summoned from the extra deck, right?
It was not. It was special summoned, but it was not special summoned from the extra deck.
Interesting.
So he had to use the Book of Moon to save himself, but in the end, he also stopped himself from...
Yeah, so he did what he had to do,
Yeah.
but it did diminish the power of his Shadow Fusion. But
Now, he's still got plays left. He's going to go ahead and destroy one of his own artifacts with Artifact Ignition to put it in the way of Blackluster Soldier. However, Blackluster Soldier can attack multiple times. So, He activates Artifact Ignition, destroying his Beagle Attack, and setting setting Moral Talk from his deck.
This is all in the end phase? Oh, this is all still in the battle phase.
Yes, this is the next turn. Elshadal Fusion is activated. He's had to reveal that he has a Star Seraph. He fuses the face-down Winda along with the Star Seraph, or a Construct. And the goal here, I think, is just to put in so many attackers that even with the artifact effects, he can still get through. He's not going to, though, because of Artifact Moral Attack and its ability to destroy a face-up card. Let's take a quick look at Artifact Ignition.
Round 10 is after round 10. We're still playing end-of-match procedures. If you have a question, raise your hand and call a judge.
Now, the other thing we have to think about here is it is entirely possible that this match will wind up being a draw. We're still in the Swiss round,
Yes.
so if they are tied in life points after the end of match procedures, they will essentially both be eliminated. 1 point isn't going to cut it at this point.
That would be unfortunate for both of them. The life points are different right now, so it doesn't seem too likely that it'll be a draw. But it is a possibility.
Crazier things have happened.
They certainly have.
And both players have visibly picked up their pace of play at this point because they know that they don't want to draw. The only way to move on is to win.
Right. It's also likely that, well, I don't know exactly how much time they have left. It's possible that the outcome of this one duel will determine the outcome of the match if they're unable to start a second duel.
Takes a quick look at Lancia. Not super relevant other than a body.
Oh, looks like they're in turns.
Yes.
So the outcome of this duel will determine the outcome of the match, since this is the first of their duels.
End of round announcement came in, and you could see our judges in the top corner, or the top half of the screen. They were indicating whose turn it will be for turn 1 of the 5-turn end of match procedure.
As you can see, Robert Cedar is currently up by 500 life points, so the pressure is on Timothy Lee. But their life points really are so low that most likely, if there's any change in life points here, it'll be to end the duel.
Mind Control is activated, targeting Artifact Lancia. Lee very hesitantly hands it over, not activating its effect.
Why wouldn't he activate its effect?
I'm not entirely certain. Maybe he thought that his opponent wanted him to tribute it, or actually the way he pointed at Elshadal or at Shadal Fusion gave me the impression that he thought that his opponent could not do that, and that fusion summoning was a tribute, or one of the things that is prohibited by mind control. You can't tribute the monster you get with it. Two constructs on the field now after the Shadow Fusion. He's got a Shadow Fusion of his own, but the trick here is that he's not going to be able to inflict any damage through the constructs.
Yeah.
Whatever he special summons, even if it's another construct, there's no damage calculation is going to occur here.
Does Lee use Blackluster Soldier?
He does.
He hasn't seen it yet, right?
He is not. It would be a special summon monster, though.
It
so
would
he'd have
be.
to banish a Winda, or not a Winda, a construct, somehow get it to survive the attack of his opponent's construct, banish the next one, and then I don't think there'd be enough turns left. No, he'd get one more, because he'll have the 5th turn.
Yeah, that would be tough. He has ways to deal with the El Shadow constructs, but not too easily. You know, Blackluster Soldier all the way at the beginning can banish them one a turn. He would have to protect it, as Jerome mentioned. His own constructs can trade with his opponents.
Oh, speaking of the Envoy, we just saw it at essentially the bottom of his deck. He wasn't getting there anytime soon.
All right, so that might change now that he's shuffling.
But with 550 life points, I think survival is the priority here. Now, Winda, strangely enough, is the one monster that damage could be punched through. She can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So Construct would not just destroy her, it would still battle normally.
If he can summon 2 of his artifacts, he can make a rank 5 monster.
Pleiades. Pleiades would be good.
Yeah. And or he can summon the Winda, an artifact. So that appears to be the approach he took, and he summoned...
That's not legal. You need 2 level 5 light monsters for Pleiades. The only thing you'd be able to summon is Artifact Durendal.
Durendal. Is that helpful here?
No. Durendal's only helpful when you're trying to protect a lead by changing your opponent's effects into things that aren't useful, namely spell and trap destruction, or by shuffling their hand back in when they're trying to put together a combo.
In spite of that, he summons it anyway.
That's the play he's got. Otherwise, you're leaving a Winda that your opponent will just attack you for the win through. With 2400 attack, he'll survive, especially considering that Durendal will just be destroyed. And he detaches to try to get a new hand. So let's take a look at Artifact Durendal. This is not a card that you see particularly often. But it's a rank 5 Xyz monster, has multiple abilities. And the one that he is using is the ability to shuffle both players' hands into the deck and then draw the same number of cards as they shuffled into the deck. So he's basically shuffling up and hoping for Blackluster Soldier here.
Does he get the effect of his Winda when it's attacked as an Xyz material?
He doesn't. He does.
Yeah, I think he was trying to figure out whether or not he can add the card to his hand and then shuffle that into his deck, but it looks like he was unable to do that.
Correct.
The Durendal's effect must resolve first, and then Winda can resolve. So he uses Winda's effect to add El Shadow Fusion to his hand. Or changes his mind, Shadow Fusion to his hand.
And it seems he's finally drawn into a Sanctum. Hasn't seen one all game.
Is Moral Talk in his deck?
Moral Talk is not in his deck. That was post Jar of Avarice. Goes ahead and activates Shadow Fusion, and then his opponent says, hey, wait a minute, you already activated Shadow Fusion.
Try to summon Winda, right?
Correct. So he sets 3 cards face down and is not very happy about it.
Yeah, he's not in great shape. I think he can last another turn, but from there it's not going to be easy. And the fact that they're already in turns just complicates it.
This is turn 2 of 5. Shadow Fusion, flipped face up.
Now he has his fully powered Shadow Fusion. With Artifact Durendal on the field, he's able to fuse the monsters from his deck, if he has any.
Now, that is a normal spell. So his opponent could use Artifact Durendal's other ability to change that into Mystical Space Typhoon. Force him to destroy a spell or trap card instead.
But now Cedar chooses which card to destroy?
Yes.
Okay, so...
And it has to be an opponent's card, so he might hit the Sanctum, which would take 1 construct out of the equation.
Okay, so that would be helpful.
In the end, though, I don't get the distinct feeling that this will help much as it will delay the inevitable.
I tend to agree. Oh, he hit it.
He does hit the construct. So best possible scenario for Lee.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's just delaying the inevitable. But is it possible for him to win still?
With one construct out of the way, Blackluster Soldier could do it.
It would banish that. But he would still need a monster to attack with. Does he have access to that?
I think he'd have to draw that too. He's out of artifacts. Otherwise, he would have flipped. Oh, no, he couldn't flip the Sanctum because it was during the resolution of a chain. So what would have to happen here is Construct would have to destroy Dorino, which it does. Then he has to draw Blackluster Soldier, banish Construct, and Cedar has to draw nothing, so that in the 5th turn of time, Lee can attack and win.
Yes, so that could have happened, but it didn't.
He's got Shadow Fusion and Sinister Shadow Games.
It looks like it's been determined that he can't legally activate that Shadow Fusion.
Judges are explaining that actually you can. You do have a Shadow in there. And so Blackluster Soldier on Lloyd at the beginning finally makes an appearance in the graveyard.
I assume he had no choice but to send the Blackluster Soldier. There was nothing.
Yeah, it looks like nothing else.
Yeah, I guess he did not have a Shekinaga left.
In this case, he's going to trade them off against each other. Get his Falco. And just wall up and hope his opponent doesn't draw anything on the last turn.
Yeah, that's actually not the worst thing.
Now, the Falco does not have enough attack points to make up the difference. It would be 650 to 550.
Yes.
If its attack goes through. Core is activated in response to the attack of Construct.
Oh, that's going to be tough. That puts one more monster in the way.
It's fairly sizable.
Now, can the Construct destroy the core? He destroys any special summon monster, right?
Correct.
So he could destroy the core with the Construct, which seems like it would be the best play here, right?
It would leave him with his own Construct still on the field.
Yeah. So we saw before when he went through his deck for Shadow Fusion that he does have a Mathematician in his deck, and that's a monster with 1,500 attack points. That's enough, if it gets a direct attack in, to beat Cedar. At this point, you have to just hope that his face-down cards are completely useless. The problem here is even if he destroys the core...
Shadow Fusion comes back.
Yeah.
Fusion Summon, Shadow Core, and Construct. And he uses it to put 3,000 Defender in the way. That'll also let him bring multiple Shadow cards back to his hand, so he'll be able to use the Shekinaga to negate Construct's effect.
Yes. So that's cool. And he also brings the core back to his hand, so that's another defender to put in the way.
Cedar's basically just telling him, you're not getting through.
Yeah.
It's not happening. Sides against setting his last card. Then changes his mind and sets it anyway.
Okay, so this is Cedar's last turn.
Last turn of the duel for Robert Cedar. I don't think he's going to try to deal the last 550 damage.
Doesn't seem necessary at this point.
And now it's the final turn of the duel. Timothy Lee has to deal at least 500 damage. If he deals 500 damage, he can take Cedar down with him. If he deals 501, he can win.
I don't think he can deal one.
Yeah, my money's on he's not going to deal even one.
He definitely wants to consider his options here, because this could be his last turn in the tournament.
He's drawn into Artifact Sanctum, which isn't going to be useful since there won't be a next turn. Flip summons Shadow Falco. And
if
Vanity's Emptiness is chained to it.
he drew into a Sanctum, now, if he ignitions the Sanctum, that won't work because you just set it, right?
Your opponent has to destroy it.
Oh, that's right. The opponent needs.
So what he was thinking here before Vanity's Emptiness showed up was, well, if I have another monster and Leo, Keeper of the Sacred Tree, maybe I'll get through.
Yes, you're correct. For Artifact Sanctum, if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's artifact, you can target one card on the field, destroy that target. So the Ignition Sanctum combo does not work.
We know, however, that Shadow Core is down there, and even if he did have Leo to get past Shekanaga, it was not going to happen. Yeah, this isn't even a situation where you could somehow sneak in a Gaga Cowboy because Shekanaga's there to negate it.
Shekanaga is there to negate the monster effects. Vanity's Emptiness is there to stop special summons. Mistake is there to stop him from adding cards from his deck to his hand. He's pretty much as well protected as you can get.
And Cedar's been very fortunate that after Mistake was face up, the only Star Seraph he drew was that one Sovereignty.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was pretty lucky. And we mentioned earlier he might be able to finish the first game without revealing he has Star Seraphs. Ended up being irrelevant.
It turns out he's going to finish the whole match.
He's going to finish the entire match.
And that'll do it. Timothy Michael Lee can't get through the last damage despite having a commanding lead for a vast majority of the duel. He was up for a long time.
Yeah, he was. In the end, though, everything fell apart.
Yep. In a bizarre twist of fate, Robert Cedar and his Star Seraph Shadow deck defeats Timothy Lee and his Artifact Shadow deck by a score of 1-0.
Yep.
One more round awaits. And before that, we're going to show you one of our greatest matches from day one of the tournament, which is Aaron Murphy versus Nicholas Villanueva. Game one of that, which is round 6 yesterday, is coming up next, so don't go away.